my presentation about the Iran oil crisis and Mossadegh in the Cold War. But my book covered in 1959 to 1953, 49, and 1953. There is a new publishing book. This is Routledge, first one, Routledge edition, and the second one, Azari edition. Azari edition more large than Routledge English edition, and about Mossadegh, which of very famous person 20th century of 20th century Iranian history. He is very attractive person for history, and he several times was member of Iranian Majlis parliament, and was head of National Front government in Iran from 1951 to 1953. At first, I want to speak a couple of words about historiography, history of National Front and Mossadegh and the oil question and the anti-British movement in Iran 50 years last century. If me speak about historiography, I can note that several historians were research and published very interesting and fundamental books. For example, Homa Katazian, Mossadegh and the Struggle for Power in Iran, Farhat Diba, Mohammad Mossadegh, a political biography, Ervand Abrahamyan, coup 1953, the CIA and the roots of modern United States-Iranian relations, Sepehir Zabil, the Mossadegh era roots at the revolution, Mark Gazirovsky and Malcolm Burn books, Mohammad Mossadegh and the 1953 coup in Iran. Historian Fakhreddin Azimi, The Crisis of Democracy, the two chapters, these books about Mossadegh period, Iranian history, and my friend Dr. Milani's book, The Shah. When I prepared this research, I very a lot of place I use Dr. Milani's book, The Shah. I think this is one of more interesting book Iranian history regarding to last centuries. And the British historian Christopher de Bailligua, Patriot of Persia, and I can especially note that Dr. Ali Rahnuma books behind the 1953 coup in Iran. There are a lot of articles and dissertations and presentations about this period. Besides the Western historiography, there are Russian historians different time wrote about the Mossadegh period, and the national front and the oil crisis of the Iran early 20th century, 50 years 20th century. I can note three historians in Soviet time and post-Soviet time where research these events. First one, this is Professor Saleh Aliyev. He was long time Moscow and one of notable historians where research history of Iran. Last book, Professor Aliyev, it was history of Iran 20th century, and in Soviet time he was first Russian scholars were wrote articles and books. Mossadegh movement in Iran were published in 1976 year. History of Iran. This is editor was Professor Arabachian. The big chapter about anti-imperialist movement in Iran and the National Front in power. That was first more objective research about Mossadegh period in Iran. After the post-Soviet period, there are Dr. Artyom Kalinovsky. He approximately 5 years ago, were published very interesting article about Soviet Union and the Mossadegh Soviet policy regarding the Mossadegh government. There are English version and Russian language also. There are this article, and my friend Professor Vladislav Zubok's article were 5 years ago published in diplomatic history. Very interesting books. Soviet Union, Soviet policy regarding to Iran. This is covered wartime and post-wartime until August events in Iran, 53 years. But Russian scholars not research Soviet policy regarding to Mossadegh and the National Front. Mainly, they were research the British policy in Iran, United States policy, anti-imperialist movement in Iran, oil crisis, and the struggle Iranian people against British Empire and etc. A couple words I can speak about sources because when I prepared these books, use a lot of and very unique archive documents from different archives. The first I can note that the United States National Archive and Record Administration, which are named Archive to Maryland, and 2070 year, the State Department were published second edition, this Iranian documents which of these edition more large about Iranian documents after open CIA's documents in State Department announced a lot of new documents, and when I was work in Institute of Historical Research at the University of London. I had opportunity to work British National Archive in Richmond. There are huge documents in this archive regarding to Mossadegh, regarding to National Front, regarding to oil crisis in Iran, British-Iranian relations, and these documents, I think, use a lot of historians use these documents. When I read Dr. Milani's books, I saw that Dr. Milani very good research these documents. And besides the British and the American documents, I add the new documents from Russian archives. Because Western and the Iranian researchers, mainly based in the American and the British documents, and the Iranian historian also the Western sources and the Iranian documents, Iranian press and the documents of Iranian press, but Russian documents were openly last years. And this is very interesting, very unique documents. And after these, after appear these documents, new direction in these events I can research and write. Russian documents, at first I can, when speak about Russian documents, I can note firstly Russian State Archive, also Cabinet of Ministry and the different ministries' documents besides foreign affairs ministers and the KGB, Soviet Security Service documents, also documents different foreign trade, cultural ministry, and the economic and etc. Were kept in the Russian State Archive. But this is State Archive, and in Soviet Union was the Communist Party, because Communist Party was ruling party in Soviet Union. Communist Party documents after collapse Soviet Union opened early 19th years last century, and this is first one Russian State Archive of Social Politic History was named Ergaspi in Russian letters, and the Russian State Archive Modern History, which of named Ergani in Russian. This is until October 52 year. All part of documents cheap first one. This is Ergani after 19th Congress Communist Party, Soviet Union until collapse 1991 year. All the documents held in first archive. Besides this party archive and the state archive, there are separately archive of foreign policy, Soviet Union. This is separate archive, and the was Iran Department foreign policy, also documents regarding to Iran were sent from Soviet embassy in Tehran, different council organization in Iran. Also diplomatic documents keep it this foreign policy archive. Where and the state security agencies documents, this archive now closed, but there are different documents. State security agency were sent to Communist Party member of Politburo and Foreign Affairs. We can use these documents from party and the foreign policy archive. And I can inform that I use Turkish diplomatic archive documents. That's very interesting documents where I use this is, for example, Turkish ambassador in Tehran meet Prime Minister Mossadegh, Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs. They are sent a report about this meeting to Turkish Foreign Affairs. These archives, these documents were opened approximately 5 years ago. 2019 years, these documents began opened. From embassy of Turkish embassy Iran. After that, different Turkish embassies, for example, London, Washington, Ottawa, different West European countries also sent very interesting information and reports regarding to British-Iranian relation, United States-Iranian relation, and etc. For example, the Turkish embassies were situated in Middle East countries, Lebanon or Egypt and the different Arabian countries. This also very interesting, this research. Regarding to National Front and the nationalization of Iran's oil, this process were began autumn 1949, and the end of this year, Mohammad Mossadegh and several prominent opposition politicians were establishing the National Front in Iran. In a relatively short period, the front's charter and the political program were drafted, and the organization was founded in November 12 of the same year. The primary objectives of the National Front was the promotion of the civil liberties, including freedom of the press, free and fair elections, and the defense of the Iranian's national interest in the dealing with foreign powers, especially in relation to the Anglo-Iranian oil company. Soviet diplomatic mission in Iran closely followed in process of forming the National Front even during its early stage. Based on reports received from Iran, Mikhail Maximov, former Soviet ambassador to Tehran and the deputy head of Near and Middle Eastern Department of Soviet Minister of Foreign Affairs, prepared memorandum addressed to Vyacheslav Molotov on October 28, 1949, titled On the National Front in Iran. Maximov informed Molotov that the newly founded National Front was led by Dr. Mossadegh, one of Iranian's well-known political person. On December 2, 1945, Mossadegh submitted a bill of the Majlis aimed against the Soviet Union, and the Iranian parliament approval his anti-Soviet proposal. At the end of his report, Maximov drew the following conclusion. According to press reporters, the Iranian government does not obstruct Mossadegh's group's activities. This may be explained by the Iranian regime desire to create a democratic image in the upcoming 16th Majlis election. From Maximov's memorandum, it became clear that the Soviet Union had a mistaken impression of the National Front and its leader, Dr. Mossadegh. The same time, Mohammad Reza Shah was not ready for the National Front movement. In October 30, 1941, a massive demonstration organized by Tehran students in solidarity with the Egyptian people and against British intervention in Iran's interior affairs greatly troubled the Shah and the royal court and the circles close to the British. According to Soviet intelligence, frightened by the rally, Mohammad Reza Shah told his mother, Nimtaj Ayrunglu, on following day that is reasonable to leave the country than to live here always in fear for one's life. And this information gave Deputy Minister of the Soviet State Secretary KGB to the Politburo member. Next page, please. In the parliamentary election of 1950 year for the 6th Majlis, the National Front provided only modest presence led by Mohammad Mossadegh. The movement won just 8 seats in parliament. Upon the opening of the new parliament, these representatives formed the Homeland faction, Vatan faction, while the faction positioned itself against totalitarianism. It also emphasized loyalty to national values and approach that resonated deeply with the Iranian public. Immediately after election, the National Front declared the oil issue as at its central political priority. In the autumn of 1950, as discussions around the Anglo-Iranian oil company intensified and the idea of oil nationalization began to gain traction, the National Front's political standing grew significantly stronger. On March 3, 1951, Prime Minister Hasanli Razmara addressed to Majlis Oil Commission. In his speech, he acknowledged that every Iranian patriot desired national control over the country's natural resources. However, he noted that such aspirations not hinder the nation's progress. Razmara firmly opposed the nationalization of the oil industry. Only 4 days after this speech, he was assassinated by a member of the Fedayeen Islam. The assassination of Razmara deepened the political crisis in Iran. On April 26, the Majlis Oil Commission passed a resolution in favor of oil nationalization. This law was ratified by the Shah on May 1st, 1951. The law had been authored by Mohammad Mossadegh and was through the determined efforts of the National Front under his leadership that passed in the parliament. Mohammad Mossadegh government aimed Cold War tensions. This is very interesting question about regarding this topic. The 1953 coup d'etat in Iran should be approached in the context of the nationalization of the oil industry. To the Communist Party treaty and the Cold War. What was the connection between the Mossadegh movement, the nationalization of Iran's oil industry, and the Cold War? If one trench of the Cold War that flared up in the 50 years passed through Korea, the second one passed through Iran. This sequence was preserved in the reports of the world press for a long time. The fact is that the communist threat was merely a tool used to conceal the real motives with the Cold War. Yes, it was. The tying of nerves, the collapse of Iranians' economy through blockades, and the disruption of the country's financial life, and the maintenance of the constant of the psychological tension among the population through propaganda built-in lies, all these over integral components of the Cold War. In the early stages of his premiership, Mossadegh exhibited a degree of the openness towards the Soviet Union, but the Soviet leadership remained skeptical of Mossadegh's goodwill. After reviewing confidential report, Ambassador Ivan Sadishkov concerning secret talks with the Iranian Prime Minister, which of sent Politburo, and the Politburo discussed this report and sent a directive to Ambassador Sadicevov. Where started, Mossadegh is attempting to exploit the current situation using us as leverage to blackmail the Americans and manipulate both the British and the Americans in his own political games. A couple words about to the party, which of different historians wrote a lot of books about and articles about role to the in events early 50 years last century. Tuda was accused named different books and the documents were accused of being the Trojan horse and the fifth column of the Soviet Union in Iran. However, research into Soviet archival documents shows that during the peak years of the Cold War, from 1951 to 1953, Moscow had no plans for expansion into Iran, for it to the takeover, or for a Mossadegh to the islands. In the fact, there is no serious evidence in the documents of Soviet government, the Communist Party, or the security service, Soviet security service, including Soviet leadership, even discussed intervention in Iran or seizure of power by the Tudeh in general. The Tudeh's supposed ambition to come to power, seize power, or take power are not confirmed by Soviet records or by documents the party itself submission to the Soviet Union. Moreover, the Tudeh leadership, following Soviet ideology and the Stalin-Molotov theory, regarded Mossadegh as bourgeois nationalist, contrary to Marxist doctrine. In Iran, Mossadegh considers the Tudeh tool of Moscow and accuse its leaders not of being true communists, but rather agents of Britain. At the time, there were even rumors in Iran of two separate Tudeh parties, the British Tudeh and the Russian Tudeh. However, in order to gain United States support, Mossadegh also used Tudeh fear to convince the West. Indeed, the Americans and the Russians wanted to use more caution against Mossadegh rather than the Tudeh party. Indeed, at the beginning of 1953, Khashoggi's support had significantly reinforced their position. The Soviets were also secretly supporting them. What the Prime Minister Mossadegh attitude towards the Americans? That's very interesting question. The answer is very interesting. On September 21st, 1952, the Turkish ambassador in Tehran, Ali Türkcel, met with Prime Minister Mossadegh. When Ambassador Türkcel asked Mossadegh what he think about the Americans, the Prime Minister replied that they are very good men, but they also have tasted the opium of exploitation. Secret oil decision with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union sought to distance itself from Mossadegh's government. In August 1951, Soviet ambassador to Iran, Ivan Sadishkov, reported to Moscow about his meeting with former Iranian diplomat Hamid Sayyah. Sayyah remarked that Mossadegh had not yet resolved the oil issue, and this government will fall whether that oil issue is resolved or not. The Soviet Union both openly and secretly contributed the weakening of Mossadegh's position. When Iran faced an international oil crisis, certain political factions in Tehran began to explore the possibility of selling oil to the USSR. One of the main supporters of this idea was Ayatollah Khamenei. In the autumn of 1952, under the instruction of Vyacheslav Molotov, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Soviet Union prepared directives for the Soviet ambassador in Tehran. The directive status closely monitor the situation in Iran and promptly inform the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Soviet Union on the following key issues: disagreement within the National Front, including difference of opinion between Mossadegh and Khamenei, the plans and the intentions of Mossadegh's government regarding the oil issue. If Mossadegh and Khamenei once again raises the issue of the Soviet Union buying Iranian oil, the response should be as follows: we are willing to buy oil from Iran. However, considering the difficulties of transporting oil from the Persian Gulf, would be preferred the oil to be delivered to Iranian ports on the Caspian Sea. It was like not buying Iranian oil. This station were taken the discussion and the resolution of Soviet Politburo, where keep in Molotov funds in party archive. The Soviets support Ayatollah Khamenei to weaken and overthrow Mossadegh. The Soviet Minister of Foreign Affairs instructed the embassy in Tehran to support Khamenei in the conflict between Mossadegh and the Khamenei. Many have wondered why the Soviet Union did not support a movement struggle against British imperialism. An examination of Soviet archive documents suggests that there was a sharp contrary between Moscow declared ideological principles and its actual policy towards the events in Iran from 41 to 43. What was Soviet Union's attitude toward Mossadegh? The 2 months before COP of 1953, after meeting with the Prime Minister, the Soviet ambassador to Tehran, Ivan Sadichkov, described the Prime Minister in his report to Moscow as an incredible mixture of treasure, cunning, and hypocrisy. What is Mossadegh? In general, this was the attitude of the Soviet Union towards Mossadegh. After rebellion, July 1952, Mossadegh was formed new government cabinet. When the second cabinet was established, the Shah was also forced to appoint Mossadegh as Minister of Defense. On the evening, this second cabinet was formed. A telegram arrived from the Hague stating that the International Court of Justice rejected the British complaints against Iran. On October 27, the government official announced the suspension of the diplomatic relation with Britain. In mid-October 1952, Turkish ambassador in Cairo, Hulusi Fuat Tugay, urgently reported in Ankara an interesting piece of the information obtained from a highly reliable sources. The ambassador wrote that very important intelligence had been received from a trusted source indicating that the British were secretly preparing to occupy the Abadan oil region and establish a separate government in southern Iran. It appeared that Great Britain was planning to create a second Gibraltar in Abadan. After diplomatic relations were severed with the United Kingdom, the Soviet Union grew concerned about interesting American influence in Iran. This concern was noted by Deputy Foreign Minister Soviet Union Yakov Malik during the meeting with the Iranian ambassador on November 29. He stated that when it comes to Iran, the United States and Britain act jointly. But Ambassador Nader Arasta responded that Iran has not freed itself from Britain just to become subservient to America. However, after the presidential election in November 52, the situation changed after the new United States administration took office in March 1953. Britain and the United States adopted a unified strategic approach towards Mossadegh government. Couple words at conclusion. After August COP, the Mossadegh arrested, and the 53 December British diplomatic representative come to Iran for organize opened British embassy in Tehran. Very interesting. After 1 month, which of he lived in Tehran, he sent a report, Anthony Eden. This report is very interesting. There are many opinions here suggesting that Dr. Mossadegh and other ardent nationalists still enjoy a broad popular supported, perhaps even greater than the current regime in Iran. Thank you very much. I think
Thank you, Dr. Hasanli. I'm sorry to rush you. Yes, we have a few questions, so let me get right to them. The first question is from a viewer who says, "Congratulations, Dr. Hasanli, on sharing your research through this fascinating book. I have read it with a great interest and would like to ask 2 questions. The first question is, have you also published an Azerbaijani version of this book? And if so, are there significant differences between the English and Azerbaijani editions?"
Thank you very much. This is 2 months ago, we published in Azerbaijan edition this book in Azeri language. This is my original version, and this is more larger because this English Routledge put a limit words to English version. Therefore, this is larger, maybe 30-35% larger these books than English, and we translated these books to Persian language, and maybe further after 3 or 4 months, it will be Persian. That's very interesting question. But first party archive, which of documents keep it hold in first archives. This is until October 1952. After November and also 43 years. This is Molotov documents and the foreign minister documents. Until today, this is not open. And now work in Russian archives, there are special difficult because who is work documents foreign countries regarding to foreign countries, they can give foreign ministers support letter to archive. Foreign ministers give agree the researchers that can work in this archive. But archive new modern history no open. Therefore, we wasn't find these documents directly regarding to August events in Iran.
Thank you. Another question from a viewer. They're wondering how accurate this view of Mossadegh is. After the Islamic Revolution in Iran, the Khomeiniist movement started to criticize Mossadegh's nationalist movement as it was not in line with their fundamentalist Islamic ideology. Soon after, the extreme right within Iran, who was in charge of the coup against writers such as Ali Mifratus and likes started attacking Mossadegh as someone who violated the constitutional law and used false equivalency to blame him, as opposed to figures who were in charge of the coup. How true is this line of thinking? I think they're asking.
At first early time, Islamic revolution, the attitude towards Mossadegh was normal. If I remember first time Prime Minister Iran that time go to Mossadegh grave, and there are speech Prime Minister cemetery which of stated Mossadegh's grave. But that time everybody think that Iran turned to Mossadegh period or Mossadegh idea. But after revolution, Islamic revolution, regarding to Mossadegh changed. The new regime not interested in popularization Mossadegh, and they announced that this is different idea, nationalist idea, Mossadegh, and the Islamic value that is interest difference. Therefore, first time was some articles and the memoirs were about Mossadegh were published. I remember maybe 2001 year I was participate conference which of Wilson Center and the Iranian diplomatic documents administration jointly organized the conference in Tehran. There were foreign scholars participate this conference, but religion scholars that time was against Mossadegh nationalist idea. I think Islamic regime not ready to Mossadegh's national, not ready about Mossadegh's nationalist movement, write openly new books or articles or television programs.
Thank you. I know we're going to go a few minutes over. We'll try to get in a couple more questions. Another viewer asks, how did the USSR positions on Mossadegh change after he refused to extend the fisheries concession in the Caspian Sea in 1952 and let it expire? The Tudeh party became very critical of Mossadegh after that, as it was known in Iran as the nationalization of the fisheries.
There are separate chapter about the Iran Fish Company. It's very interesting questions. Soviet very wanted regarding the Iran Fish Company, and the Mossadegh reject Soviet proposals regarding this agreement, because Mossadegh says that we make nationalization Iranian oil and the anti-British campaign which of in Iran press write about it. In this time, we didn't sign a new agreement with Soviet Union. After that, the Tudor and the lefts organizations were activities. They are published Mossadegh's caricature in different left press, and the very wrote different newspapers critical articles about Mossadegh. And I can add also Iran press, that time's Soviet embassy, prepared a review, Tehran press, 2 times in months and sent to Moscow, and one copy also sent to Baku, Foreign Minister of Azerbaijan. There are a lot of leftists and Tudor authors about against Mossadegh, which of published in these newspapers.
Thank you. I want to ask one last question from a viewer. They write, it is stated that millions of dollars of Iranian gold were held by Soviets during this time and were only released after the coup. Any information or thoughts on this?
Yeah. There are information that's very interesting. Mossadegh and the foreign minister of Iran several times wrote and asked Soviet Union over the Soviet embassy in Tehran, Ivan Sadichkov, return Iranian gold 11 tons, 11,000 tons, and the 8 million American dollars were Iran 1942 sent to Moscow Soviet State Bank for keep this treasure, and according agreement after war, Soviet Union must be returned these gold and the dollars. But Soviet Union different ways reject Iranians. Razmara, before Mossadegh, Razmara also asks this gold and the dollars, but Soviet Union didn't give in Mossadegh government. One of leaders to the party, Mariam Firuz, prepared document report about Iranian events, National Front period, and she wrote Soviet Union wasn't support Mossadegh, and don't Iranian gold and the American dollar to Mossadegh government. But after that, Soviets give this gold and the dollars to Zahedi government. There are documents about it. I give this, my books, there are very interesting documents about it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hasanli. Franco's included a link to the book in the chat. Thank you for taking the time to share your work with us. I'm sorry we were short on time. And thank you, Ms. Delahunt, for translating for us today. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you very much for organizing this webinar, and thanks, Franco, for technical support this event.